Atlantis, fact or fiction? Could the Atlantis myth be based on real events? An enormous landmass, an ancient yet unusually advanced society of godlike humans, sunk into the oceanic abyss by gods during the time of legend and myth. Let's take a look. Plato's Atlantis is described as a continent-sized island which was once located directly west of the Mediterranean Sea, in sight of Europe and Africa. It was supposedly ruled by 3rd and 4th generation Olympian gods. It was supposedly sunk into the depths of the Atlantic in a sudden and turbulent manner, as a result of the wrath of more ancient and powerful gods, who were displeased with the wickedness of the Atlanteans. Similarly, the pre-flood world described by Genesis and other accounts speaks of a supercontinent landmass. It was said to be the place where humans first descended from the gods, an unusual place where humans, animals, and plants were said to attain fantastically old age and giant size. The continent was said to have sunk in the depths of a great flood sent by God due to man's wickedness. Sound familiar? So it appears that the Atlantis story has strong similarities to various other recorded happenings in ancient times. Plato said his information about Atlantis originally came from the Egyptians. According to many scholars living in Plato's time and thereafter, Plato was stating what he believed to be true historical facts. Let's look at more commonalities. Plato refers to Atlantis as an island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, meaning west of the Mediterranean Sea. Similarly, an Egyptian mythological place resembling Atlantis, La Meta, is also noted as being in the west. North African Berbers call it At-Ale, the Vikings call it At-Ali, Babylonians and ancient inhabitants of India spoke of it also. The Latter-day Saints describe the City of Enoch as having been located adjacent to North America, which is also in the west. Many ancient cultures attested to the existence of this mysterious land. Let's look at some facts from geography. It is obvious, looking at a map, that the major continents fit nicely together. A large body of evidence built on Wagner's Pangaea confirms that Earth's land surfaces used to be composed of one enormous supercontinent. Science, using several lines of evidence, shows that Pangaea was both submerged and subsequently broken up 4,300 years ago. The pieces drifted apart following the flood as the Earth resumed rotational equilibrium. Lines of evidence from fossil, geological, zoological, botanical, DNA, linguistic, cultural, and others attest to the breakup of the supercontinent at that time. According to Plato and the Egyptians, Atlantis was sunk as a result of an earthquake in a single day. Note the similar wording in the Genesis account where it says, "The same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up," or in other words, water bursting through huge earthquake fractures. Note that observers of the Atlantis upheaval didn't actually see Atlantis sink. They only report it being shrouded in clouds and in turbulence, and that after the turbulence died down, Atlantis was no longer there. So they assumed it sunk. This is another place where the Atlantis account seems to have entwined elements of more than one event. There are elements of the taking of Enoch to heaven before the flood, the occurrence of the great global flood, and the drifting apart of the continents after the flood. Genesis and Chronicles recount the drifting apart of the continents after the flood, when they say, "In the days of Peleg was the earth divided." Peleg, a third great-grandson of Noah, lived about 200 years after the flood. The Tower of Babel was said to have been destroyed about this time, probably as a result of the same global upheavals going on. Native American creation stories call the American continent Turtle Island. Turtle Island is said to have risen from the depths like a turtle's back, slowly rising to the surface, a description of waters receding off the rising continent after the flood. This is the part of the legend talking about the flood of Noah, when the continent rose to the surface. Turtle Island is also said to have drifted to its current location from somewhere else. This is a description of the thin continents drifting across the globe after the flood. Thus we see Plato's Atlantis and Turtle Island are the same landmass, described from differing points of view, a broken piece of Pangaea that drifted apart in the days of Peleg shortly after the flood. Atlantis is said to have been ruled by Poseidon and other Hellenistic deities. Poseidon is Neptune to the Romans and is closely linked to Noah and Japheth of Genesis. Descriptions of these gods are similar to descriptions of the pre-flood world, where, from fossil evidence and ancient records, we know that all living things lived much longer and attained much greater size. These pre-flood people were apparently later regarded as gods by the Greeks, Romans, Norse, and others, an era often termed the Golden Age of the Gods. Regarding this age, it is likely a reference to 1. The actual gods that created this planet, as Genesis recounts, this is my belief, and 2. The pre-flood world, as well as 3. The first few human generations after the flood, where many humans are reported to have attained unusually long life and giant size. Let's talk more about Enoch. According to Old and New Testament sources, the biblical patriarch Enoch was the 7th from Adam. He was the son of Jared and the father of Methuselah, the great-grandfather of Noah. Enoch was reportedly taken up to God. Genesis says, "He was not, for God took him." According to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints theology, the entire city of Enoch, sometimes referred to as Zion, was taken to heaven because of the righteousness of those who resided there. The city of Enoch supposedly encompassed an enormous area of land. This land and the society on it are described as having been utopian or heaven-like. Enoch, along with his city, including animals, buildings, and land, are said to have been taken up to God. Perhaps it was a turbulent event, leaving behind only an oceanic abyss. Notice the several similarities to Plato's Atlantis, a huge area of land, much more than what we would call a city. A society of godlike humans suddenly vanishing in a shroud of turbulence, never to be seen or heard from again. Other stories that relate closely to Plato's Atlantis, the City of Enoch, and the pre-flood world are Welsh Avalon, Ireland's Brazil, Slavic Bayan, the Quran's Arama the Pillars, Russia's Kitsa, India's Kumrai Kandam, China's Kunlun and Pengali Mountains, Aztecs' Aztlan, and many more. The Great Flood is an event that is spoken of in over 500 narratives, legends, and myths from nearly all peoples residing on nearly every portion of the globe. Science shows evidence that a large comet disrupted Earth's equilibrium, causing the supercontinent to be submerged and broken up. So let's ask the question again. Did real events shape what we now call Atlantis? Well, Science proves the Great Flood happened and that the continents broke up soon after. And there are several sources attesting to City of Enoch type events. So in my opinion, yes, Plato's Atlantis has elements of the pre-flood world, elements of the story of the City of Enoch, and a pretty good description of the breakup of the supercontinent in the years following the flood. And all of these historical events have been attested to in the ancient writings of multiple nations from ancient times onward. Atlantis, though some of its details are shrouded in mystery, and perhaps some errors have crept into the narrative over time, it is definitely a real place that used to reside just west of Europe and Africa. Thanks for watching.